question? Those in favor? Approved. Thank you. And the minutes of the September 10th, 2020 Ag Service Board meeting? Plus?
I'll move the minutes as presented.
Thank you, Plus. Anything else out of there? Call for the question for approval. Those in favor? Carried. And moving down to reports, we've got the Supervisor of Agricultural Services report. Gary, go ahead.
Yes, this will be my report for 2020. And just before we get going here, I would just like to acknowledge staff that continued to show up last year and made the year a success. It was not an easy year to manage or for anyone to come to work. We had 3 staff over the age of 60. There's lots of concern there, and even the younger guys, there was lots of concern about showing up for work. We reached all of our goals, and that's because of staff. I'd like to also acknowledge a couple of retirements that we've had. We haven't been able to acknowledge them formally. Kevin Vrostik, he announced that he will not be coming back this year. Kevin is an integral part of our ASB and has been for 12 years. So, a little story about Kevin. Guys will go out and deliver a trap or the brilliant drills, and now all they're getting is, where's Kevin? Where's Kevin? So, very respected amongst our ASB staff, and also very respected in the public and the producers in Lethbridge County. And the second retirement that we'd like to acknowledge is Lorraine. Lorraine's been gone for about a year. We meant to take her out to dinner or something. Because of COVID, we haven't been able to do that. Lorraine helped out with the ASB agenda probably for nearly 30 years. And I never ever had to tell Lorraine what to do. Lorraine told me what to do. And I know both are likely watching today because they're still in contact. I put out the agenda the other day, and Lorraine starts texting me, critiquing it for me, which is appreciated, so she's still around. With that said, we'll move on to my report. The ASB grant was renewed in 2020. The legislative portion of the grant was cut by $46,000 to each municipality and was paid a little later than usual as well. The environmental stream was renamed Resource Management just a couple weeks ago. It was announced they're going to pay us for the full term as well, and paying us for last year as well. So the budget on the books last year, we had a deficit of $70,000. That was all closed off, so we couldn't apply the $91,000 to that. But in the grand scheme, we were up $20,000. So we strived throughout the year to maintain within the budget guidelines. It was impossible to do with the resource management because we didn't know if we were getting it, and everything said we weren't. So it was very surprising that showed up. And the resource management, or actually the legislative portion of the grant, the main grant, we had already set our budget before we knew it was going to be cut by $46,000. So in midstream, we had to try to make cuts, and our expenditures were cut by about $46,000. It just worked out perfect that way. So not a bad year, just impossible to manage. Does anybody have any questions about the grant? Okay, moving on. Mowing, did a little more mowing than usual, about 5,000 miles of gravel and hard top in 2020. And there was some snow in early October, and that slowed things a bit, but we were able to get things done, and we're happy about that. We have a disc mower that helps out when the second pass is very light in some of the dryland areas in the far south and in the far north as well. So that keeps us on track. Hamlets and subdivisions, same thing here. We always do them twice. When the roadsides go by for the last swing, they'll catch and make them look good for winter, and they still look good now. So we like to make them, attractive to residents, so. Mowing was also done for weed control in hard-to-spray areas and shoulder poles where the grass had not established yet. Quite a bit less work here just because a lot less construction done. I mean, in the peak years, we were up to 80 miles of seeding, and we were overwhelmed by that job, so a little more manageable right now. Moving on to weed control. Most of the roadside spraying took place in Divisions 1 and 2 with spot spraying throughout the county. A little bit harder to spray in Divisions 1 and 2 just because of the population. We did get it done for the most part, and lots of spot spraying happens in other parts of the county as well, but 944 total miles, that's well ahead what we intend to do. We tend to do a third of the county, which is just over 700, so. Bed and shore, that's the problem weeds, the knapweed and the blue weed along the Old Man and Little Bow rivers. Not an area you want to spray, so we do a lot of hand picking in there, and also we've taken to releasing biocontrol agents. So we released 4 leafy spurge sites and 2 knapweed as well. And these are well received by the public. They don't want to see spray in those areas as well.
Are those biocontrols working like those are the bugs they release and that?
That's right. It takes a long time for them to get established. When I started with the county, we were releasing bugs back then. Those ones are working. You can tell something's acting on the plants, and it's never getting worse. It's actually getting a little bit better without spraying. So they take a long time to get going.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question. You said there's a lot more spraying. Most of the spraying is done in Division 1 and 2. Is there a reason for that, or can you explain that?
Yeah, so we intend to spray 1/3 of the county a year, and we do it on a rotational basis. We have 3 areas that are set out. Last year it just worked. It was Divisions 1 and 2. This year, we're going into Division, it'd be 5, 6, and then the following year, it'll be 7 and 4, some of 4 as well, so.
So, like, do you feel if you tackled, like, just a few at a time, that the results that you get, that, like, you see that, the results of that in the coming years quite a bit, that it's still working?
Yes, it depends on what chemical we use. In the past, we've used some residual chemicals, which help buy us some time. But we're going back and spot spraying in the other divisions that aren't part of that 1/3. We're not leaving weeds out there for the most part. We're catching just more of a handgun thing than a big truck blanket spray. So, moving on, the road top vegetation truck, that helps with the vegetation on top of the road. We did 178 miles. We're treating with some different types of chemicals that have worked decently. They need rain to get into the soil to stop the weeds. They're pre-emergent. In some cases, what we've seen is we'll spray the shoulder, say 4 feet, and then the weeds are growing inside that 4 feet. We got to get a little better at respraying inside or getting the grader operator to take control of those weeds a little bit quicker. So, pest control, the annual grasshopper survey, of course, numbers rising somewhat, not a big concern, but with the dry weather, it might become an issue. We always have hot spots that seem to be in the northwest part of the county, up against Barron's North, and then the south area by the airport is always a hot spot too for grasshoppers. And there's an attachment there that explains grasshoppers, if anybody cares to take a look. The Bertha armyworm survey, that was carried out, again, in numbers varied depending on individual fields, and I've attached the pest survey, and that's just for your guys' review. Bacterial ring rot, that's potato survey. We did, so I think 7 fields this year. Nothing found. Clubroot and blackleg, the province really likes, getting a handle on where things are with that. So we always take part, and we, of course, nothing found yet in Lethbridge County. Fusarium survey was completed in 2020. No numbers in yet, but Fusarium was taken off the Pest Act, and it's still important to have a handle on. I called the seed cleaning plant, the county plant, and I asked Brian, I said, are people still doing their seed testing to see if they have Fusarium? 100% were still seeing what they were starting with for seed, which is great. So, strychnine, 2,081 bottles of strychnine were sold last year. That's down. The gopher population seemed to be cycling a little bit down, which is good, because this is the last year that we will be able to sell strychnine. We've been selling it already. I phoned all the producers that purchased last year, and they've come and picked up what they need. We have a very limited supply left, and it's the last year we can sell it. Next year will be the last year if there's carryover from producers that they can use it. So after that, it'll have to be taken care of. A private trapper was hired for a couple weeks, so that's part of the rabies detection that we do. And no rabies found. We usually focus on the south end of the county and eastern portion, just because we believe that could be where rabies come from the U.S. or Saskatchewan. So didn't catch a lot of skunks last year, but that's just sometimes how it goes. I'll have to take a deep breath before I start talking about soil erosion. So
Well, you can come my place, you can get a lot of soil in there.
there has been a lot of soil erosion, more than I've ever seen in my time at the county. We always try and work with producers. There are some out there that maybe don't check their fields, or maybe need a little boost to get out there and do something. There are a lot of issues with soil erosion. We'll have the soil erosion policy coming up later. We can further discuss how we deal with it, but we've dealt with a lot of producers on getting them out there to do something. So it hasn't been fun. Everybody has been receptive to doing what they have to do, and some guys just need a little boost and maybe a little education. I find I'm dealing with another generation of farmers, the younger farmers, that haven't seen this before. And so we're working with them, telling them what they need to do, and telling them the importance of their topsoil if they don't know already. So it's been quite a spring and winter for this. So roadside seeding, the ASB crews, we undertake the seeding, drain, shoulder pulls, and we take great pride in leaving the road in good shape when it's done. We are pretty excited about this season. There's going to be some road construction, full-on road construction, and we know they're going to build good roads, and we want to make them look good at the end, so we look forward to doing that this year. Tree removal and brushing. So ASB staff, we undertook that last year. So we keep maybe staff on a little longer in the winter. And it's another job staff likes. Very busy. We've removed a lot of trees this year. And what we're doing, I bought several boxes of chemical that treat the trees so they don't come back. So if there's trees just randomly on a road, we'll treat those. We don't often treat when they're along a yard. There's no risk, like it'll only kill that one root that's going down, but a lot of guys are nervous about that, so we don't want to kill any trees by accident. So very careful with the chemical, but we've gone through a lot just because we don't want them coming back and having to recut. So
What is the process on doing that? You drill a hole in the tree, in the stump, or how do you do that?
no, it's cut stump treatment, so you just cut and you just barely dribble some on over the stump for the most part. You can even kill the ones that are suckering without cutting if you go around the whole tree, but it seems to be working well, and we think it'll save some labor years down the road. So the main tree that we're trying to eliminate is Russian olive. If you really take notice in the ditch, it moves with water, it moves with birds. They're kind of an unwanted tree, and so we're really treating them once so they don't come back. Equipment rentals, the Brilliant drills have been a hot item since we replaced them, bringing in revenue of around $5,000 per year. They're more than paying for themselves, and this is a good way for our staff. This is where you meet the farmers. I mean, with Strychnine going the wayside next year, we still have to have a connection to the community, and traps and rental equipment's a way of doing that. So, skunk and magpie traps, these are incredibly busy. We'll put it out on Facebook that we have traps available, and then they're gone. We have a lot of them. We've bought more. We're going to build more magpie traps as well. They're always out. It's difficult now to get one. So, plastic baler, the use has jumped significantly here. We had 11 users in 2020, and previous to that, we had none in the years where there wasn't an area to take your plastic to. So the pilot program where you take your plastic to Iron Springs has worked incredibly well. The machine is going out every week now. So there's lots of use. And the DBS Environmental, who manages the transfer station, they're part of that pilot program. And they will even pick up grain bags if you have 10 or more. So it's great for the producers on the south side of the county, and you don't have to load things up, which is working good. There's also a pilot program going on now in the county for silage plastic. So you can take silage plastic and they can compress it. They have built some manual presses that kind of use hydraulics, and they'll compact it. They've taken some of these out to feedlot owners who have a large amount, and there's going to be some available at the Iron Springs transfer station that will probably stay there. It's plastic that probably wasn't getting recycled in the past, so we work a little bit with Clean Farms. They called and they asked where to take these, who's bringing in this plastic, or who. So we work with them, and they want the plastic. They don't want it going in the ground or being burnt. So
they are saying silage plastic can be recycled now, because before they always said it has contaminants in it?
well, if it's clean and they're showing it's got to be cut pretty consistently, and then before you got to fold it up nice, and then before it can even be compacted. It's like a 4x4, the size of a pallet or something. They're pressing. I got a sent a presentation yesterday. Maybe we can bring it to the next ASB meeting. So. Plastics and recycling definitely on the upswing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just Gary, the grain bags, do they compact them just into a same process, or are they just wrapped in a round thing? Or how does that?
Yeah, so we have a Kirchner bag roller. So that rolls, you pull it in and it tightens as you go. So it's somewhat compacted than just being loose. And then you put twine on around to hold it at the end. So they're not compacting with those presses, no.
I'll just add a little piece to that. I just spoke with DBS yesterday, and we'll bring this to the Waste Commission meeting in regards to the plastic recycling for both the grain bags and the silage. The silage is a big one, and they have a kind of a prototype. They received a grant essentially for developing a prototype essentially for compacting those silage bags. So those are going to be in. We have got 3 of them, and they're portable. They're going to place them in a couple of our landfills or our waste transfer sites essentially right now, and then they will be able to be transported to site to potentially go to a livestock location essentially to be used there on site. And they're quite, they're made out of recycled materials themselves, so it's a good initiative and a good program, and we will have some more information coming to that as that program develops a little bit more.
Yeah, no, my question was about the silage plastic, because there's an awful lot of that stuff there, and thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So silage plastic is the most common one, the tarp type like they put over top of the pit, or is it the bag?
Yeah, silage plastic is what they're cutting off the pit.
Okay.
And they gotta cut it, be careful if they cut it nice, then it can be saved. And often it's dirty, and it's gotta be a certain, less than 10% contamination, I think is what they like, so. All right, moving on. Parks, so parks, shop maintenance, steady through the year. A little drier as the season went on last year, so we had time to paint buildings and do a little extra maintenance there. So cemeteries were mowed twice as well in 2020, and same thing second time around. Not a lot to cut. First time around, a tremendous amount. So in 2020, upgrades were completed at the Sunset Acres Playground. Work included significant equipment upgrades, including paving the pathway and the basketball court as well. This park, I've seen very limited use prior to it being renewed. I was there 2 days ago to inspect the park, full of kids. Little bit, not really an issue, but a lot of the kids are coming out of the city. I kind of talked to some of the ladies that had their kids there. The parks in the city are, with COVID, are very, very busy. And so they're bringing your young kids out during the day. The basketball court is seeing tremendous use. There's a whole group of pickleball players, both from the city, and there's 10 players, I think, in Sunset Acres that really enjoy that game. It's getting a great use. We've been given a lot of compliments for the work that we've done there, but I mean, the community is helping us out. So in February, the weather was nice, as you know, and the pathway, I was very concerned that my phone was going to start ringing as soon as it snowed, come clean the pathway, and we just don't have the resources to do that. The pathway is being cleared. There's been a couple guys that have snow blowers. One guy bought one specifically just to do this. I mean, it's not something that we suggest everybody go do, but they're the ones that are walking on it, and they also do the court as well. So they're playing pickleball in the middle of February. So it's great to see use where it wasn't never seen before. So, and with that, the renewal, our idea this year was to go to Monarch and build a playground. And working with the community, the school, and everybody involved there, it was decided to push back that build till next year. Very good decision. They're creating a society. They've done a whole lot of work. They have a great community out there and a lot of community support. This is going to be a very large project, bigger than we've ever done in the past. And the reason for it is the need. And the school is a big supporter. They have resources there from their farm families. Their families come a long way to go to that school. So they're willing to help out. There's community members that have really taken the lead on creating the society. There's a lot of work. The documentation that they've built is incredible. It's incredible that they have the resources to do that. So all parts of the community, including the community association, are involved. I was able to have one meeting with them in person, but that's changed. And moving it down a year is the right decision. With Sunset Acres, we were excited to get that park going. We waited on some of the things that were going to go into that park. They come from the U.S. or wherever they come from. It was just the availability wasn't there. So we'll move it on, and then maybe when we start it up, we can get it completely going and finished. So their ideas there is basically that everything is in that park might come out and everything's going to be new. Not sure on the tennis court. The tennis court is in decent shape, but the community doesn't like where it is, and if they're going to raise a bunch of funds, it's their community. They're going to say what goes in and where it's placed, so within reason. So
Gary, it'll be the one at the community center? Is that where it'll be replaced, or is it more that western one?
No, so it has to be on county-owned land. So it's the western one that's up against the field and directly to the north of the school. For more usage, I think the general consensus is to, close to the school. Then you can take in all the school's got some stuff too. But this will be much, much better equipment, I think. And then, the baseball diamond, they're gonna have to figure that out. Soccer's a bigger thing than baseball right now out there, so how they organize that. And when we redo these parks, I'm always asked about irrigation. And, the county's given so much money, irrigation can eat that up very quickly. We want to see the county money spent on amenities. If they want to do irrigation, that's something that they can use the funds they collect for. And there is an appetite out there for irrigation. We'll see where it goes. I mean, even the water rates can be expensive to get sometimes just for a park. I know one of the schools in Picture Butte had to renew their irrigation license, and just the license was over $20,000 for the rights. I mean, it gets cheaper after you buy the rights, but I mean, then it's down to probably $400 a year or something like that for a school, but it's not cheap.
Does delaying it 1 year, does that give them enough time to, I guess, raise funds and everything? Or do we need to go another year? Or?
No, I think 1 year should be fine. They've got everything written up. The thing is here, they'll have some funds. The county kick-started it with, I think it's 160 now we've committed to there. The province has given money in the past. There's been a program. I think it will continue. It's set aside already. But that's kind of a matching thing. So with our 160,000 and the work of the community, they could easily make this, it's going to be over $400,000 park, or to $500,000, I hope. So, yeah, no, it's going to be impressive, I think, and the community's got such support. It's going to be just like all the other ones that we redo. It's going to be well used.
Gary, just a question. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Have they approached that new business or that business that's in Monarch to maybe get some matching funds for the park there? The one that just set up for along the rail tracks, or that might be a suggestion to talk to them about. There might be some corporate money there.
Yeah, they put out, I think, a poster at the mailbox, but I also kind of instructed them that there's a lot of rural people in the Monarch area would be more than willing to give funds as well. So they're hitting everybody, I hope, because it's everybody's community. So there's a lot of people involved there, especially when you consider that school brings people all the way from Fort McLeod to Vauxhall, just about, I think. So, yeah.
It might be an idea too, Gary, maybe if they want to put something in like one of our newspapers or newsletters, and if you want to suggest that to the committee, we might be able to get the message out there.
No, that certainly is a good idea to promote that the best we can. We don't want to leave anybody out either, so.
You were talking about the tennis court there. Is that used a lot? Because the tennis court, I mean, it's quite an investment and everything like that. So
I've never
is
seen
it worth it?
anybody in the county play tennis, but they use them for basketball. So that's an area where that needs to be upgraded. We don't have any proper basketball nets there that are set into the ground. Community members have taken it upon themselves to bring in those portable ones and strap it to the, we need improvement there. And then what some of them use them for, in Shaughnessy in particular, is they have a curb around the edge and they flood it for skating in the winter, and that is incredibly used for that. Diamond City, same thing. It's kind of like the hockey without ice. They're using it for in basketball as well, but not tennis. I have been approached by a member of Shaughnessy that would like to see the pickleball there as well. These courts, when they become worn, they're not smooth. It's very rough, and it would be difficult to do that unless it was resealed or even repaved. So we will be coming around to Shaughnessy, and that's our next park that we want to kind of refresh in a couple of years. So, you have a question, Morris? No? Okay, good. Moving on, farm family. Of course, there was no Calgary Stampede, so with the cancellation of the Stampede, there's no award. The Slomp family of Picture Butte, they hold their nomination until that award is presented. And we're getting indication from the Stampede that something will be done this year, so they can move on there, I hope. Farm safety. A $5,000 donation was made to the Farm Safety Center through the Ag Service Board budget, as it is allotted every year. So in return, this year, COVID hit, and they had to shut down their in-school stuff. So they had 822 students that they put through their Safety Smarts program. Normally, it's 3 times that amount. There's a letter attached to my report that you can read that explains everything. They're going to online. The work they do is incredibly important. So moving to the online format, they're going to catch the rest, as many kids as they should, but they've also been cut with provincial funding. Some of their funding comes through the province, and they've been cut substantially. So our donation is really important to them. They're very thankful. In that letter, Laura Nelson, I believe her name is, that has run that program for 20 years, is retiring. So there's going to be a renewal. A new person has been hired, and they're going to take over that online stuff. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on the farm safety, I think it's a great cause. I think it's a great way to spend some funds. Just on a personal level, I know that it works. I know that the farm safety program in the schools works. I know that week they spend going through that. My daughter has come home, and my daughter is not particularly interested in farming or what I do on the farm, but she has some very stern talks with me during that week about stuff they've learned at school and things that she's seen me do on the farm. So I do think it's a very worthwhile initiative, and also I think it's one of those opportunities where any opportunity where we can talk about farming in the classroom is a great opportunity, and if it's safety, I think it still opens those other doors. So I think it's a great initiative.
All right, moving on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you see the opportunity to work in conjunction with farm safety to have a little piece about food? Like, you know, they could maybe make a combination type of class where they could learn a little bit about, you know, beef and pasta making and stuff like that, as well as safety. Do you think that's something that's worthwhile looking at, or?
It is being done, but not through the farm safety group. So I was last year to go to one of the schools in Lethbridge, and they were going to have a program put on by Ag for Life, and they brought in different sectors of agriculture, and they were teaching the kids on where their food come from. They're doing a really good job, and they asked me to bring in speakers. So we worked with the local ag community, and we brought in feedlot guy, and grain guy, and they brought in folks from the tractor dealership. So they're doing an incredible job, and it was a half-day thing. That particular one, they didn't work with the farm safety, but it's being done as well. The group there is called Ag for Life.
Yeah, Gary, you probably heard of that, the CAP program too, that's the class agriculture program that's been done by the province. It's organized it. Would that maybe be an avenue to go with to get some more exposure on what we're trying to do?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of groups out there. I think we could do a better job of getting together and, like Lauren says, maybe have a more concerted effort to hit them all at one day, right? One agriculture day. Some schools are doing that, the more rural ones, I would assume. But yeah, there's some improvement that certainly could be done there.
Because the CAP program, if I'm not mistaken, I think that concentrates on grade 4 that they do their talks. So, and I don't know how well that went this year. But.
Yeah, I imagine like in everything, any extension events are nearly completely shut down, right? So bringing anybody else in is difficult. It's something to consider, but I think we're probably a year away before we really get something going.
Even if they could put a video together of
Mhm.
all of them or something, and then at least it gets out to all the schools.
Yep. And I think maybe my role can be just connecting the people.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like, we used to go to Calgary also, they had those Aggie Days, I think it was the beginning of April, and that was, you know, all sectors of the agriculture industry, they were there and had either presentations or they had a nice booth set up, you know, and showing the, basically, normally for mostly the school kids, you know, what agriculture is all about. Is that thing still going in Calgary? And they had something like that in Lethbridge too, on a smaller scale. Is it still going?
Yes, it is still going in Lethbridge. They have Aggie Days. I think it's sponsored by UFA.
What did you call that one in Calgary?
I'm not familiar with that one. It may have been a similar concept.
Yeah, and the one in Lethbridge is, it's not last year, but the years before, it's fairly a big size. They go with school buses down there, and there's hundreds of kids going down there. And it's
Yeah, it is popular, and especially with the city kids, because they're the ones that don't get exposed to the rural life or agriculture. So having a petting zoo and things like that are very interesting to some kids. So, and we've been asked to put a presentation up there, like a board or whatever, to show what Lethbridge County has to bring. So, and once again, I think that one was shut down last year as well.
maybe it'd be worthwhile, like not a print day, but just to have a booth there. Because that way, I think you probably connect more if somebody's there all day, and it's not that long. I think it's 2 days, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and that's what we've done in the past, and we get the opportunity to do that every once in a while. Last year, we went to the university. They had an ag day, and we set up our booth there, and it was a lot of students come and talk to us, and it wasn't the ones that were related to agriculture that come talk to you. It's the ones that want to know about agriculture that just have an interest, and a lot of foreign students as well. And we always take advantage of any opportunity that we're invited to promote agriculture, that's for sure. All right, moving on. Some other activities that we're part of. We have a farmer pesticide certificate course we held in February last year, 2020. We planned on doing another one that year. COVID got right in the middle of that one. We went to an online course this year. We promoted it as best we could. Between a few counties in the south, we were able to come up with 3 people. It wasn't worth our time. Well, I think there was 1 or 2 from the county is all. So there's other avenues we suggested that they can do or next year or so. So we also took part in a nutrient management seminar series. So this was held online for 8 weeks this year. The program was an incredible success. It was helped out by the County of Warner took the lead on this one, and they did a really good job of getting it online. We had 300 and some people take part in this seminar series. Great speakers from across Western Canada. There were folks from overseas that took part in this seminar. Very labor-intense thing to run. I'm not sure whether we'll have it and next year maybe have run its course, but it was very good this year. And as well, we've also attended Ag Expo as a vendor for 7 years, not happening this year, so it's disappointing. Last year we were able to go, it was right before for COVID. It's always good to be in front of the ag citizens of Lethbridge County and answer any questions that they might have, so.
Maybe this is more question for Steve, since you're on the exhibition board. The Ag Expo and everything, will that, with them starting to build a new building, will that all continue to go if?
Yes, that's definitely a plan to make it bigger and better.
All right, that's my report. We'll move down to the attachments, and I'll just skim over these. And up here is our Ag Service Board business plan is attached. So as a requirement of our grant, I have to put the business plan in front of you to see once a year. The business plan is unchanged from last year. There's a few very light alterations, mentioning of the resource management. As well, when you get down to the accomplishments, of course, we renew those accomplishments every year and what we achieved. We achieved everything we wanted to last year. Was, like I said, more difficult to manage and get done, but we did do it. Some of the extension events, of course, there's no extension going during a pandemic, and we don't see a pickup on that this year either. It'll be into next year before we start seeing more extension events. Here's a letter from the Farm Safety. It explains what they're going through there, and obviously a very difficult time for them as well. Their extension, it was hard to put anything on, so they're moving online, as we mentioned earlier. They're the schools that they went to. Very limited, like usually the numbers are 2,400, and they had 822. Now we move on to a couple letters I received after the Provincial Ag Service Board Conference, which I think everybody took part in. The letters from Red Deer County as well as Saddle Hills County. Basically, they're stating they're dissatisfied with the process that took place. Hard to have an online conference with that many people. The resolution session, maybe I'll let Steve or Morris speak on that and give their opinions of how that went.
In my opinion, it was a gong show. It was, I mean, it went on 3 hours for, I don't know if there was 8 resolutions or something. The RMA that we just had a month ago, it ran great, and it's half the same people, so you wonder why you can't do it at the Ag Service Board level, but it's almost every conference at the Ag Service Board, there's a lot of amendments and there's a lot of back and forth of trying to make a resolution perfect instead of just moving on and dealing with it. But yeah, I can see their frustrations.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the problem more lays in how it's laid out, because at RMA, the floor kind of doesn't really own the resolution. It belongs to the group when it's presented, but there seems to be more direction given from the Ag Service Board Committee as to what they will or won't accept and allow versus what happens at the RMA, and it seems to be a very time-consuming process to get through all the stuff that they put forward that they think everybody should just swallow up and listen to, instead of the other way around. I mean, your resolutions originally came from each municipality, but yet the Ag Fieldman's group seemed to think they should dictate or direct the discussion more so than the RMA. And I think it just leads to a very lengthy, complicated process.
It certainly didn't work.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
I just had a question. Do you think that it would be worthwhile for us to send a letter kind of outlining that more?
It might be. I think it's just the way the process is put together. I think if it was more simplified, like the format the RMA follows, it will work better. But there seems to be this kind of middle ground in there that you kind of have to get through to get to where you want to be, and sometimes that's a barrier.
Yeah, I think that middle ground would be the Ag Service Board Provincial Committee, so that would be one elected member from each region of the province. And so they're taking on those resolutions and they're fine-tuning them before they get to the conference, but it's not always perfect. It's becoming more confusing, especially for those ones that are putting the resolutions forth, right? They're getting changed, or even, you know, one suggestion here was that there was a couple, I think was on strychnine. Why couldn't they have been combined? I mean, maybe it was just harder for them to meet and go through the process as well, but These letters perfectly state what went on, and I think it's a big eye-opening, and I hope corrections will be made. Some of the input from these letters is that we don't want to lose our voice as an Ag Service Board, and people aren't going to take us seriously if we keep going down that road, is the point they're trying to make, and we do not want to lose our voice. So if we're doing a resolution, or if any county is doing a resolution, we got to make sure it's an important resolution that your ag fieldman just can't make a phone call and get an answer to, because a lot of times, as these letters state, that is the way to go. I mean, if we write a letter ourselves instead of going this route, I'll have an answer in 2 days, where these could be months away.
A lot of the resolutions don't even need to be there either, because a lot of them aren't from the intention of the Ag Service Board. Like, it seems like every year we deal with something about agri-stability or other things like that, but that's what our producer groups are out there for. I mean, there's probably 10 producer groups in the province working with the federal government and the provincial government on agri-stability and other things. That just because it's ag-related, it doesn't have to, in my opinion, go through the Ag Service Board.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, Steve. I think that's the whole intention, because I think, like all these resolutions that go to the government and stuff like that, if we want credibility of the government, I think that we, you got to more speak with one voice, with the ag, and not every little group doing their own thing. And I think it's a good comment, yeah.
Yeah, I think some very good points there. Moving on, we had the insect survey results. These are just attached to read at your convenience. We will put these out on social media or in our next newsletter for producers to see. We always take off the land location. We don't want to, put anybody's personal information out there. So those are the surveys. Some we do, and some the province does themselves. So, and lastly, if you had a lot of time, you could read the report card on resolutions. A lot of pages there. This is for your information if you want to take the time to read those. I mean, the resolutions are put to us several times a year. It's your chance to look at what's going on and the feedback they've got on these resolutions. I think that covers my report. I have a presentation to do on the Weed Control Act, but I think our presenter is here. Maybe we can bring him in, and then I'll cover that presentation at the end. So,
Go ahead, Lauren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I forgot to ask you this earlier, but I was just wondering, it's not necessarily your issue, but for roadside mowing, I noticed that after the first snowfall we had this winter, where we had quite a bit of snow, when the grader had its wing down on the outside, that little stubby wing,
yep.
a lot of the grass along the edge kind of rolled over into the ditch, and you got some huge clumps of sod in the ditch. Is that going to be an issue come mowing time next year?
It shouldn't be. Usually they'll break down in the amount of time. Just like the soil erosion, the soil breaks down. Yeah, and some those areas you're seeing, I noticed that in your division yesterday. It's on the hills and stuff where there's not a proper ditch, so it's difficult for the grader operator to know where the ground is. So they're curling, they're curling that over. But yeah, no, it's not usually a problem. Over time, it can build up, but usually it washes down. Yeah, it can silt a culvert over 30 years or something, but not a big concern, no.
Maybe just in that same vein, Gary, we touched on the erosion earlier. What kind of challenge does that pose for you when we see some of these ditches that have been, silted in and blown in quite extensively from land that is eroded? Does that become a challenge, and at what point does municipal services have to intervene there?
That's a good question. So we work with Public Works when there is those concerns, and I think Jeremy may be better answering that question.
I missed a good portion of it, but I think the gist of it is that we're talking about the cleanup of essentially the roadside ditches for the ones that do get filled up with topsoil and so on. So obviously we work with the producers to essentially, if they can reclaim portions of it, We still got to follow proper practices. We're allowing them to clean up specific areas as required. We evaluate whether or not that's something that's going to require more extensive work from on our behalf, and we'll look to collaborate with the ASB essentially on those needs. This is somewhat new territory because this is very extensive this year, and the amount of sediment in some of these areas could potentially affect some future drainage, but usually typically over time there is a natural amount of debris that collects in the ditches. So at this time I don't see any immediate concerns for that aspect. We have the enforcement angle if we need to with the Soil Conservation Act, but at this time we're just going to work with producers as best we possibly can and then assist accordingly.
And there has been a number of producers that have offered to clean up those areas themselves. Some ask, and that permission is given through Public Works if they want them to do that. Some producers just do it and they don't let you know, which it's okay until you hit some infrastructure and then there's a problem. But the widespread amount of soil in the ditch right now is incredible to what I've ever seen. As bad as we have it, it's worse in other MDs closely connected to us. They are moving soil off the road with snow wings. So, not good in some areas. And, you'll look around and think you've seen it all, and then you'll drive down another road and there's some more. And it looks like hills in the desert sometimes, so.
Any more questions for Gary? If none, then a motion to accept his report for information. Lauren, thank you. And call for the question. Those in favor? Thank you. Approved. And just to repeat what you had said, just congratulations to Kevin on his retirement, and enjoy your retirement. And thank you for your years of professional service. And moving on to 10:30 appointment, we have Alan Efetha from Alberta Agricultural and Forestry. Do you want to start that, Gary, or?
Yep, I got it up here for you.
Okay.
If you want to come up here, Alan. Sort of.
Some of us that are over 50.
You got your report loaded up, Alan. Oh, good. Scroll through it if you want, or whatever you want to do. Thanks for coming.
Morning, Alan. Welcome, and we should probably go around the table and introduce ourselves. I'm Steve Campbell, Ag Service Board Chair.
Well, I've had it in District 6.
Paul Horvath, Division 3.
Corey Campbell, Division 2.
Warren Meeky, Division 1.
Warren Easter, Division 7.
Ken Bassett, Division 4.
CAO. And the nice to meet you.
So Gary invited me to come, and I don't know where to start. I guess we can start with the field visit, eh? Whatever you agree on. This thing, hopefully it's going soon, eh? Thanks. So we do the field visits for several reasons. And the number one reason is to satisfy the Auditor General's requirements. Because public money going out, we have to satisfy the Auditor General's office requirement. Secondly, we do have terms and conditions for the grant. The ASB grant is 2 streams. One stream is legislative, and the other stream is environmental. We changed the name recently to resource management, eh?
Yep.
But it's the same thing. So when we come for a field visit, we want to satisfy, number one, of course, the Auditor General is the boss. And for our office, Doug and myself used to be Pam, but she's retired. We want to strengthen the relationship between our office and Gary's office and you guys. So the governance side, the ASB side, and the administrative side, Gary's side. That's our major objective for coming out from our office point of view. Thirdly is to take advantage of coaching some of the newer inspectors or fieldmen, to coach them how to implement the 4 acts that are under the ASB Act. So the implementation of the ASB Act, Weed Control Act, Agriculture Pest Act, Soil Conservation Act, and we also touch on the Animal Health Act, some of the requirements under the Animal Health Act of reporting the diseases and assisting in case of emergency, assisting the chief veterinarian. So those are the 5 acts that we come to look at from implementation point of view. And I also interested, when I go out, I realize that South, Central, Northeast, Northwest, the peas are not the same. It's like traveling through different countries. So you're unique. I listen to your unique challenges and needs, and my personal interest is to understand those unique interests and challenges, so that when I'm given opportunity to represent you, I'm accurately representing you. You guys, you're lucky. I've been down here in the South for over 20 years. I used to be an irrigation guy for 15 years. Then I switched regions and said I want to work with the counties. You're more fun to work with. I tell the people from the Peace region too, when I go to Fort Vermilion, I tell them, you guys are more fun. Because I've lived in 2 extremes. I lived in Fort Vermilion, so I know the Peace in and out and the way they think. And I've lived down here, and I know your needs. We have unique needs, and I need to be able to represent you guys when given a chance. Yeah. So those are the reasons why we do the field visits. So on the day of the field visit, we usually start with a short meeting with the ASB. And in some regions, the ASBs are the council. And in other municipalities, they have a hybrid system. So they have the members at large admixed with the councillors. Both systems are good. There are pros and cons for both systems. But in 1997, they made the ASB Act more enabling. So the local authorities, you choose the structure of the ASB and the membership and all those things involved with voting. So you've been given mandate to choose which system works for you. As I said, not all municipalities or ASBs are created the same. So on the day of the visit, we start with a short meeting with the ASB or council to discuss the governance side of the act. And once we finish, it takes about 15, 20, sometimes depending who you are, you want to chat a bit more and have more discussion. It takes not more than an hour. And then from there, I take the inspector, Gary, and his crew, we go to the office to look at the records and activities and strategy. And then from there, we go to the shop to look at the tools of engagement. And usually, Gary will take me out for lunch. That's what I always go for. And after lunch, we go out in the field, now just to ground truth, what is happening on the ground. So when we're in the field, he showed me things like the seed cleaning plans. From there, we go to look at the activities of controlling weeds, special projects, mowing, spraying, all those things. He showed me that. And then And we look at the legislative side and environmental side and other special projects you have that are unique to your municipality. So when I was here, COVID is here, and I didn't have the chance to meet the ASB, but today I'm having the chance. Of course, you guys, you know, you're local, so I see you in town all the time. Hey, hi, and so, hey, hi, you know, in town. But for business, I'm fulfilling the requirement of the field visit today by meeting you guys and letting you know why we do the field visit. So usually we go with a 5-year cycle. So every 5 years, somebody from our office will show up to do a field visit. We used to call it an audit, but audit is just too strong of a word, because we are looking at the program. Audit tends to involve money, and I'm not an accountant, I'm an agrologist or soil guy. So we just call it a field visit to encourage that relationship building side of things. So, so once we finish everything, I go and prepare a report, and in that report, I rate you, or I give you marks, whether you passed, you partially passed, or you failed. And you guys, you're really lucky to have assistant inspector or ag fieldman who knows the rules. So I didn't find a lot of shortcomings when I came. It was an easy report to write, and when I didn't understand, I didn't have the information to make decision, I just phoned Kerry and said, do you have this information? Do you have that information? So basically, when I'm writing the report, yeah, I'm going to just show you, I have different categories. So you look at section 1, I'm looking at the legislative side of things, your duties, Gary's duties and requirements. So I'm looking at things like, have you done your due diligence? Have you appointed Gary as an inspector? Because sometimes I go to some municipalities, a fellow has been there for many years, but they have not actually appointed that person as an inspector under the ASB Act. And that could come and burn you in the bottom when there's an appeal. Out of, just for on a technicality point of view, somebody could bail out and get off on the hook because Gary was not appointed by the council. So we look for those details, but like enough, he gave me council minutes. It has to be recorded in the council minute that he was appointed, and the ASB board has been appointed, and the appeal committees have been appointed. And one thing I ran into when it comes to appeal committees, because you're dealing with 4 acts, the Weed Control Act is more specific. So the Weed Control Act says that the members of the appeal committee should not pose or put you in a situation where there's a contradiction. They use the word independent. So the members of the appeal committee must be independent, which means they must not have heard of the issue prior to the appeal. So now, what does that mean? It puts you in a situation whereby members of the ASB are not supposed to be on the appeal committee, technically, to be on the safe side. So those are kind of things we look at the details like that. And you can see you didn't fail much. You didn't. Yeah, I made 3 recommendations. So the first recommendation there has to do with the ASB members meeting section 3 of the ASB, which means they are well-versed, and by saying that, I didn't see the evidence. They are well-versed in agricultural issues, and they are also got skills to make policy. And the reason why that is spelled in there is that the ASB is advisory committee, both the local authorities and the Minister of Agriculture from a policy point of view. So the members, and you guys, you're lucky you have politicians who are members of the ASB, so I'm assuming that you are very well versed in policy formulation. So this occurs when you hire the new members of ASB, it occurs through orientation. That orientation teaches you the requirements of the ASB member as per ASB Act. So I don't want to go into a lot of details, but those are kind of things we look at. And you guys, you passed. All I need you guys to do, Gary, 3 recommendations on the last page.
Yep.
Yeah. So you just sign indicating that you went through the report and there were no big infractions or something that cause an alarm. So the way I categorize the passing, if it's critical, then I get back to you right away because that means that it's going to infringe on the funding. But if it's enhancement, it's just to make things better as we move forward. So I didn't see any criticality in the visit when I was here. Well done. So moving away from the field visit, any questions? Yeah. Usually those recommendations are 10 in most counties. And I find 2 out of 10 that are critical, that I have to go to them right away. But you guys, thank Gary. He has stayed on top of things to make sure that things are done correctly. So it was easy for me to tour and write the report because I didn't have to struggle with a lot.
That's good. It looks like it's just some minor housekeeping things that we need to do on our end.
Exactly. And those housekeeping could come back and bite you. Last year, Steve from Wataskowen, just the procedure, right? I teach a legislative course, and we go through writing tickets or writing notices. The procedure alone and the procedure of delivering that notice to the landowner or whoever is renting that land is very important, following everything on that procedure. So in Wataskowen, what happened was Steve followed everything except he did not post the notice on the land. Despite of the landowner receiving that notice, on technicality, they threw the case out. And it was not pretty because it was expensive. The guys had gone in there and done the cleaning up and everything, but this particular landowner knew the rules, and he got off the hook just by that one technicality. So usually you hand the notice in person, and if you cannot find the landowner, then you live with someone who is over 18, secondly. And 1 and 2, if they're not possible, you send by mail and post on the property. He did the number 1, number 2, number 3 correctly, but he did not post on the property. And that alone got the guy off the hook. Yeah. So we try to emphasize those technicalities and procedures. Okay, so moving along from now the grant, from 2017 to 2019 cycle, which we closed last year, the legislative side of things was cumulatively 11.5 million, and the environmental side was cumulatively again 1.78 million. So when we introduced the second cycle, the next cycle, which we begged them to make it longer for stability. So the first cycle was only for 3 years, from 2017 to 2019 was a 3-year cycle. And when we went back after the assessment of the program we did last year, the recommendation came that we should make it longer so that there's stability for at least 5 years. And that's what Doug and myself, we try to promote that. Please, when you're going for the next cycle, instead of making 3-year cycle, make it a 5-year cycle. The positive thing that they did was that it went for 5 years, but the drawback, it was, the legislative grant was cut by 3 million. So it moved from 11.5 to 8.4-ish. And the environmental side, lucky enough, stayed the same, but it was delayed. But when we look back, we say that delay, we got what we wanted at the end anyway. We were nervous that it was delayed. We didn't know what was happening. But at the end of, when everything was said and done, it was the same amount. So we are very thankful. And Gary, we did amend the agreement recently to include the environmental stream or the resource management stream. And I think yours was signed March 12th, yeah. So, yeah, and the money was moved, but from what I hear, you haven't gotten it, eh?
Not the last time I checked, no.
Yeah. So we have moved from the old system of grant releasing to the new system. And that new system, the one GX, is causing all kinds of havoc. So the money was released right in time, but because it was so close to the end of the fiscal year, the little delay glitch in the system pumped it into next fiscal year. So we had to do some signing of papers to make it more, to come out of this year's. But Doug is working on it and it should be out within a week or two. Yeah. So that's what we noticed happened. But most of the 44 municipalities that applied for that grant, most of them got the money. And you guys, because your program is top-notch, is the standard to other, is the standard in our office to environmental program. You have a full environmental person. You have a good program that shows results. I think you got the highest amount of money on that stream. I think next one is Red Deer. Yeah. Anyway, so that shows you're doing a good job that is noticeable. Yeah, and that program is run by a different department, just happened to come through our office as a legislative ASB grant, but it comes from Dale Krapko's office. Yeah. Yeah, that's on the grant side. Yeah, that's what I can report.
Thank you, and thank you, Alan.
Yeah, no,
So with the grant, like you said, we had the highest amount. Is that the way you presented and applied for the grant, or has it to do with a lot of the work that you've done?
So the legislative side is looked upon differently, and that's within our jurisdiction. So legislative side is not merit-based. We just look at counties and we basically give them, when we have money, we divide them the same amount, except, and it's based on agricultural intensity. So there are some counties that are in different zones where agriculture is not as intense. We claw money back. And some of those small counties, when we reduced the amount you guys used to orders from the top, when we reduced by 27%, the amount everybody used to get, we ran into situations whereby 7 counties that are small counties are not highly agricultural intensity, were ending up getting almost nothing. So what we did was to maintain that 27%, but ask for provision to help those small guys go to close to 100 grand, just to keep the lights on. So basically the grant we give you is to keep the lights on. We know that, eh? Yeah, because under the old formula, it was 1 to 4. Like you guys, you're giving almost 75, 80%, and we are giving 20%, eh? But because of reduction, it's gotten a little bit worse, eh? So we know that, eh?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Alan, just a couple of questions
Yeah.
that come to my mind. With the reduction in the total employees in kind of Alberta agriculture, and I especially think of over here at the Lethbridge Research Station, Do you see the load being increased for ag service boards from that reduction? Or do you think that most farmers will kind of do as they have done in the grain and chemical sector, go to the kind of the chemical rep or the seed company rep? Or do you see the ag service board having to fill in a bigger role now versus what they had to do before?
So Gary, that question came up with that Marcia was giving a talk. We communicated with Ag Fieldman quite a bit, almost once a week. And our manager gave a talk on key conduct program. We used to have a key conduct program whereby Alberta Agriculture, they keep on changing the names, employees, we team up with each county. Yeah, so they come, and those days, most of them were experts in soils or forages, so we used to call it key conduct program. And my boss's boss was giving a talk about the key conduct program, and that question came up. Are we going to, lack of a good word, download to the municipalities? From our office, we deal with granting. So our office, the way we have dealt with these folks is going to stay the same. I still come here and report on the grant. If you have issues, you can phone me anytime. But you guys, you're lucky because I live in town. But from extension side of things, the way I understand it, we have moved away from extension, but we still have that, the Ag Info Center. How it's going to look like moving forward, I've got no idea. And how it's going to look like, we answer your question. Yeah, but from what I hear, they're committed to have that Ag Info Center still alive. That's my understanding, but I'm not the one making decisions. How it's going to look like, I've got no idea. But we have gotten out of basically extension and research. Yeah. Again, from my understanding. Yeah. But on our granting side of things, nothing has changed as far as my office and ASB is concerned. Yeah. And that's all I can say. That's what I understand the best. Yeah, it's going to be challenging because I think the unbiased information being given, that's the key thing from a producer point of view. Yeah, the unbiased.
Any more questions for Alan at all? Guess not. Was that all you kind of had then for us?
Yeah, that's all I had, but if you have any other questions or you want to know anything, you know what my phone is. I communicate with Gary quite a bit. Yeah, just phone me anytime. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, and thanks for the report.
No problem, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Al.
Yeah. I'm done, eh?
Yep, you're good. Thanks, Al. Appreciate it.
Thanks, yeah. Enjoy yourself, guys.
Take care.
Thanks.
Probably have a motion for, accept that for information. Morris, thank you. And call for the question. Those in favor? Carried. And moving down to policy 614, soil erosion amendment. Go ahead, Gary. G1.
If you don't mind, can I do the Weed Control Act presentation as an attachment first?
Okay.
He's got it all loaded up here, so. I put together a Weed Control Act presentation, and this is just for information of how we deal with weed issues in the county. So the history of the Weed Control Act goes back 114 years. It's some of the oldest legislation in the province. That's about all that was happening, a lot of farming back then. So it was established very early that weeds were detrimental to agriculture production, and nothing's changed there, of course. So the current act and regulation, this is what it looks like, last adopted in 2010. So that's the last time they had it open for review. And when that happened, a whole bunch more weeds got added to the list. So the purpose of the Weed Control Act, protect production and quality of land from the invasion and establishment of weeds and prevent the spread of weeds. So that's the intention. Weed Control Act also protects, of course, the main reason in Lethbridge County, agriculture production. That's always been why the Weed Control Act exists. In recent years, it also has included riparian areas, so that's areas along the Old Man River and the Little Bow. We do work along there. We do not want to spread our weeds to the next county, and we don't want someone else's weeds either. And it also includes natural areas, so you'll see often weed picks in Waterton. They do not want invasive species where they don't belong in some of our parks and places like that. So other objectives of the Weed Control Act is education. We do a lot of education with producers, a lot of acreage owners on what's a bad weed, why you need to take care of it, and most people respond positively. We're also doing early detection, and this is done by everybody that is employed by Ag Service Board. So our employees are all trained on weed ID, and grader operators will even tell me where the weeds are, the ones that have been around long enough. So we're detecting early, and then of course we're taking care of those ones we find in the right of way as soon as we can, and we ID them and we mark them for future to see how we've done and to take care of them as we go. So this here goes back to that initial Weed Control Act. It was called Alberta's Weed Problem. So what is a municipal weed inspector? A municipal weed inspector should have neither friends nor enemies. They should be men of sound judgment and good practical knowledge. Their objective should be the building up of a strong community spirit, aiming to keep the land clean and at the same time making farming profitable. Every inspector should make a weed survey of his district and at all times be prepared to give practical advice to those needing it. Not a lot has changed. That's still the way we're doing things.
Yeah, just thank you, Mr. Chairman. On going back to the weed control that you have, the difference in kind of the weeds that you're trying to capture and trying to get rid of, the spray methods, how much do they differ from year to year? Because I'm sure you're not using the same ones that you had years and years ago. So how do you find out what the best kind is to use?
We keep up on all of our herbicides. So some of the weeds on the Weed Control Act are the difficult to control perennials. So we will spray, say we're doing a broadcast spray, it's that third of the county. We'll go back to those hard to kill weeds and we'll apply by hand a stronger chemical. But yeah, we're always keeping on top of the chemicals, and we will blend in residual chemicals. They're good, and in some cases, they can be dangerous. If you drift into a field, you might harm a crop for years to come. So we're very selective on where we put those. And also then, we're using just a general broadleaf killer on a lot of where we do the whole area. So.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and that's also the majority of the ag suppliers nowadays. They have good people in place to give you recommendations to how to handle certain weeds at what stages and what crops are in or whatever, and that is very helpful. The reasons for that is they're in the business to sell chemicals, and of course they want to see the best thing happening. And if it didn't happen, you might avoid that chemical deal or the next year. So they're really on the ball on that end of it, and you probably know it too, Steve and Lauren. Yeah, that is the big thing.
Yeah, we meet with the suppliers at least a couple times a year, and they're promoting their chemicals. But we get what we want. Each year we put out a tender, and that tender's out right now. So we get the lowest price. We do very good on our chemical pricing. The herbicides we use are often industrial, so they're made for right away. Some of them do cross over industrial, and they're also used in farming. So we do use some of those chemicals as well, but mainly industrial. They're different chemicals than you would use in the farm. Sometimes the only difference is the name, and often the industrial chemicals are a little more money. All right, moving on. Things that we might be doing. These are things that we are doing. So we're identifying weeds present. We have weed inspectors. We build a weed database. So we've been GPS marking weeds for probably the longest in the province. We started doing that very early on. We develop control programs, of course. Every year we go through our programs and evaluate them. We are constantly changing equipment and the methods in which we spray to improve. And then as last resort, there's enforcement. So an inspector's responsibilities to inspect, enforce the act, issue weed notices, involved action when required, and should ensure that actions are consistent with the act. So I added this slide. This one is entry and inspection power. Under number 12 in the Act, it says an inspector may enter land or inspect land or personal property at a reasonable time. A, to monitor compliance with this Act, including making inquiries, taking samples, or performing tests. And B, to enforce an inspector's notice, a local authority notice, or a minister's notice. The key is here, a weed inspector does not need prior approval to enter anyone's land. We always do, though. It's just good public relations, so we will ask. If we are denied, it doesn't get there very often, but you know, the RCMP can come in and where we can go out in the field and really assess how many weeds they are and to do up a weed notice.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, oh, my mic is still on. I better clear my lungs, I guess, otherwise you can hear that. But, you know, talking about the weed inspection and the enforcement down there, Gary, you know, like, you know, the issue is not far from my place down there, you know, and that you guys went down there, and I think you even talked to the fellow or whatever. However, nothing basically was done, and that's not just the first year on that parcel, that's the second or third year now. You know, you're talking about, you know, your enforcement you have in place. However, that sometimes is kind of tough too, I guess, to really step up to that plate and really enforce it. Could you explain it a little bit maybe?
Yeah, so when we're doing enforcement, we're always giving a person the opportunity. And oftentimes they will tell you that they're going to do something and it doesn't end up being that way. So basically it takes longer than we like to get enforcement and control. On some parcels this year, you're going to see directly to a weed notice.
So just to follow up on that, and I'm very aware of it, you know, what happened down there, but just so the rest and maybe the public finds out a little bit too. So, yeah, he says, or that person says, yeah, he's going to do something about it. And then, you know, before you know it, a month is gone by, and then the weather is at such states that nothing can be done anymore anyways. Is there, have you guys, or you have that possibility to say, well, we want you to do something this week, and if this week is over and nothing is done, we're going to take action? Is that possible?
That is certainly possible, and after we've dealt with somebody continually, it reaches that point, and the best timing will be early on the season. So early season on the ones that said they were going to do something that haven't. We'll get to what the weed notice does allow here in a couple slides, and it'll explain exactly that process. And the reason we're having this presentation is to address some of the issues that are out there and let you know vaguely how we're going to deal with them. We're going to deal with them consistently. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Gary, going back, I was thinking quite a few years ago we had an issue with a organic farmer, and seems like the rules that apply to organic farming are much different for weed control than they are for regular farming. Have they ever really kind of settled their differences there? When we gave the weed notice, it was almost passed over by the provincial body because it didn't comply with the Organic Act of the two organizations. Have they ever kind of settled their differences on that?
Somewhat, and the answer there is that if you're giving a weed notice, say, in field, where they're not controlling anything, you can only control 20 acres. So if the whole field is weeds, the Weed Control Act says you can only control 20 acres unless I come back to the Ag Service Board and get permission to take control of more than 20 acres. So you do have that authority as well. So. There's a number of things you can see, and with them, it's likely mowing. If we're dealing with a quarter section of land that has been let go, the likely alternative is that we're going to send in a sprayer, not ours, a custom sprayer to spray it. The county will pay the bill, and then the charges, if they're left unpaid, will go on to taxes. So they go on to the tax roll, and that can happen. So.
Yeah, but, thank you, Mr. Chairman. But with that, you're probably putting the organic producer out of business once you spray there, because, I mean, that, these are the things, of course, that we all know that's not allowed for an organic producer.
Yes, we would not go in and spray organic producer's land. What we would do then is take other control methods, which may include disking it in, it may include cutting the tops off, depending on what type of weed it is. It could include hand picking. So, yeah, we don't want to put them at a disadvantage, that's for sure. So,
You know, just a comment that I made, Mr. Chairman. You know, to me personally, I don't care if they want to be an organic farmer, all the power to them. You know, I know one guy close to that lot down there. They've been organic farmers for quite a few years now already. They do an excellent job, and if a person doesn't do an excellent job down there, you know, I think it is for us as a county or as you know, for the Agriculture Service Board to say, yeah, we realize that's what you want, but we don't care. You gotta, hey, stay on top of it, because that's not acceptable for these weeds to be growing and blow all over the country. So, you know, if you're gonna do it, you're gonna do it right, and if you don't do it right, I think we should have an authority down there to go in. I don't care if it's spraying or disking or whatever.
very good points. And we have some large organic producers in the county, and in my opinion, they're top notch. They come and fill out a no spray agreement every year, and they are also responsible for the right of way along their property. And they're mowing, when we come along, we mow our normal route. They're going in between, taking care of all the thistle or whatever's growing, and then we come along again, and it's actually, they've got really good control of some of the weeds in there. And also in crop, they're doing a great job. They're adding like a green manure where they'll just add a crop for the season and then disc it in for nutrients, right? There's a lot of good organic producers in Lethbridge County, and I think that's because of land values. I mean, if you're not doing things right, how do you make payments on a $2 million piece of land? So it forces you to do the right thing. We're lucky in that extent here in the county. So moving forward, so you're allowed to write a local weed bylaw to upgrade weeds. So this one is the county bylaw that goes back prior to 2010. It was rolled over and is still valid. So the weeds that we've upgraded are scentless chamomile. Back then it was restricted, now it's prohibited noxious. So we've also updated cow cockle, baby's breath, and kochia. The one of note here is kochia. Not a lot of other counties deal with kochia. It's not on the Weed Control Act. You have to upgrade it. This is one of the main weeds. Kochia and Canada thistle are the two main weeds that we deal with in Lethbridge County. They're the ones we're trying to get a handle on. Kochia in the dryland areas and unkept fields, that's the number one. So if we didn't have that upgraded, in some cases, if the guy's got a whole quarter of kochia and not doing anything, we wouldn't be able to do anything. It makes our job more difficult because we're bothering a lot more people about kochia. That's the main weed. So I think we're happy to have that remain upgraded in Lethbridge County. So how do you know which weeds are bad? Well, they're listed on the Act, and I've handed out a guide to everybody of the prohibited noxious and noxious weeds. So we hand this out at Ag Expo with strychnine this year. Everybody that comes and getting strychnine is getting one of these guides. We're promoting which weeds are bad. If the weed inspector has to go to someone's property, they're getting one of these. So this was produced by Wheatland County back a few years ago, and this is sold to ag service boards across the province as a guide to which weeds are bad. And it's a great resource, and we're happy they produced it. So this is what a weed notice looks like if we're going to write one up. So a prohibited noxious weed, you're supposed to get a weed notice if you have that category of weed. A noxious, that's up to the inspector how bad the weeds are. So what's the difference between control and destroy? Well, control, you're trying to inhibit the growth and spread. And to destroy, this is when you got some bad weeds and you've got to make it so that they don't ever grow again. Very impossible to do. You're using stronger herbicides in these cases. These are the ones we really key in on, or bad weed infestations of the noxious type. So this is what it would look like. We do not get fancy when we write a weed notice. Ours are often handwritten. In this case, it's scentless chamomile, and it shows the land location, and then where on the property it is. That's exactly all we do. We want to make it simple and legal. So in this case, the weeds will be considered destroyed or controlled if the plants are hand-picked, put in garbage bags, burnt, or buried, or sprayed with a registered herbicide for scentless chamomile. There have been a number of weed notices that have been appealed all the way to the province, and they have lost. And the reason, like Alan was saying, there's a number of reasons how they can fail, but these folks that wrote the notices, they did everything that appeared to be right. It's just when it gets to the level where it's not farmers dealing with it and lawyers, it doesn't make any practical sense. So one of the things they said when you're going to put in a control method is just put in one control method. That can be very difficult to do. I mean, how do you know if the guy wants spray or not, right? So you're going to see some weed notices this year of a larger variety. And how they're dealt with, we're going to do our best to make this all legal. We're going to make sure everything is, T's are crossed, and we're going to make sure it's the best we can. So this is where Morris's question comes into play. So there's a date here it has to be completed. So if that's not completed, we are ready. We have to make ourselves ready to go on those weeds, because if we're going to be consistent and do something, so when we do a notice on a hamlet lot, we're in there the next day, unless the person has told us that they're going to do something. So that's exactly what a weed notice looked like. And that one went through a marine bad name when she was involved. This is where it gets a little complicated, as Alan mentioned. How do you deliver these things? So the best is hand delivered, face to face. You know the guy got it. You got to make sure it's with somebody over 18, not the child in the picture here. Or you can post and mail. So if in the last year here, if they take the appeal to the minister, it has taken over a year to deal with an appeal. What good is an appeal on kochia in a field when they're gone and blown across the land? So when is it considered served? Well, when they have received it, or 7 days after mailing. So weed notice appeals. There's a right to appeal. Steps to be taken were right straightforward or on the back of the weed notice. They must provide $500, and that's returned if the appeal is successful. The appeal will first go to our local appeal board, who we appoint annually, and the second appeal will go to the minister, whose decision is final. The debt recovery notice can also be appealed, and there's been failures on these as well. So the debt recovery notice, that's the bill. So you have to be careful how you do this whole process, because you can end up eating it. And for this year, let's say if we have to go on to a quarter section of land and spray maybe twice, we could be into that spraying for $12,000, $15,000, whatever it takes. If it's appealed and we lose, we're taking a lump there. That is a lump we do not have in our budget. Can be, if the appeal is not successful, it will be added to the taxes, so we're waiting a year or more before we would get our money for that control.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Talking about the appeal, it's very sad when those people, they go through the rigmarole down there to make works of be able to appeal it. And that, can take quite a bit of a time. And it probably would take a hell of a lot less time, to take care of those few weeds. But he does have what's an issue to the neighbors or whatever, But did you ever had it already that somebody appealed? I remember that one that Lauren brought up here quite a few years ago, if you remember that case. But I mean,
we have not had an appeal for a long time. There has been appeals in the past going back 20 plus years. We are not afraid of an appeal. We know they will happen, and it's the farmer's right. We still have to get some of these areas under control. So with the, we have to be prepared to eat some of these costs, and we have to be, prepared to fail on some of the appeals. It's just, you can do everything that in your power to make it right, and sometimes it just doesn't work out that way.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Gary, overall though, with the cost of land and the cost of producing stuff, this must be a pretty small number of problems you have, is it, or?
We are very lucky in Lethbridge County because with the price of land, you've got to make it work. And there's the odd case that comes along, and there are really different situations that we have to deal with. Usually it's a unique situation. It's not about making a living off farming.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. So, Gary, like if you get notified that you got to do something about your weeds, wouldn't you always be better just to serve it personally? It doesn't happen that often, and it's going by mail, for example. A person could not pick up his mail for 14 days. And then, it's after the fact, and everything is, the weeds have spread already, and, you're working against something that you don't want to be doing.
What happens is when you're telling somebody they have to do something with their weeds, it's let up. They've been given chances 3 or 4 times. Next thing you know, they're not answering the phone, and they're not coming to the door when you're there to deliver it. That is the issue. They're avoiding you.
Another question, like if you got to do, for example, a quarter section, I don't know if that's ever happened for you guys that you had to do that. Who do you get out? Do you get a custom outfit to do that for you?
It depends. We have done quarter sections in the past. Sometimes we mow in cases where it's a difficult thing. We're prepared this year to use custom applicator who we prepared to spray land for us. They're not afraid of that. So we're getting ahead of it because often at times we've had it where, okay, it needs control. You give them a weed notice, but who's going to do it? The county can't do it with a little 15-foot sprayer. We'd be out there and cost a fortune. So a lot of times you can't find a custom applicator that's going to do something in the ag community like that. It can be difficult. We've gone in as a last resort and we've mowed a whole quarter section of kochia. So enforcement. So enforcement is only carried out when the folks don't comply. They're given lots of chances, and we take people for their word until they don't tell us the truth a number of times over, and that's happened. So also the appeal period has to lapse. So usually, writing a weed notice, you're going to get 10 days. Then if they give you an appeal, that's going to push it on where the weeds are not, you're way better off dealing with people when you can. Unfortunately, that's not always possible. So You must follow the specified what is on the notice. So if I say I'm going to go spray the whole field with this, I have to spray it. I can't go pick it. I can't spot spray. You have to be very specific to what you're doing. And here's a key one you might also find in a different circumstance this year as well. So we can list the destruction of a crop. If more than 20 acres, as I mentioned, is going to be destroyed, I need to come back here and ask for that permission. This one might be used this year because in some cases where we consider it just a pasture, a producer may consider that a forage. So if I go in and do a spray and spray out some of the other plants that they have value in, you know, I can only destroy 20 acres. So you're going to see, you could see some very unique weed notice this year from the service board. You may hear back negativity to, you know, nobody likes to be told how they're dealing with it when it comes to weeds. We treat all weed issues the same. We're consistent on our effort, and everybody gets the same. But when it comes to enforcement, when it's went too long, we don't apologize. It's just part of our job. I mean, we don't take this personally. It's just something that we have to do. So, of course, when we're doing enforcement, we follow our policies the best that we can. So we have policies that have been in front of you for weed inspection, how we deliver a weed notice, and also how we do those processes. So those ones have been reviewed back in 2016 and 2017. So this is the way Weed Control Act has been enforced in Lethbridge County for the time I've been here and before that. So we use consistent enforcement with a firm but fair attitude. We are always fair to people. We give them plenty of time and we take them for their word. As things progress, it becomes more firm on what they have to do, leading sometimes to a weed notice. We're always educating and working with producers. This is the best way. I mean, a lot of times we're working with acreage owners that don't understand that what their weeds are doing to the adjacent farmland. So we're educating, and once they find out they want to do the right thing, sometimes they need our help. Sometimes we have to go in and mow it for them and send them a bill. And solid weed control programs on public land, that sets a good example when we're encouraging producers to do the same. If I go give a weed notice on a quarter section of land and the ditch is nothing but thistle, that is not going to work very well. And they have a valid point. So usually when we give a notice, we make sure the ditch is clean first, and oftentimes we'll go out and spray it so it's very, very clean. And weed notices are a last resort. They truly are. You know, it's not enjoyable to have to give somebody a weed notice, but it sometimes gets to that. In general, we give 3 weed notices a year, sometimes none, depending if people want to work with you or not. We often do not have a lot of issues on farmland because farmers are doing the right thing. There are special circumstances where that does not happen. So.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. When you drive around the country, like in the summer and everything like that, you see a lot of acreages that, you know, that is just full of weeds and everything like that. Do you have good cooperation of them, or is that also an educational system that you got to use in order to make these people understand why it's necessary?
Yeah, so lots of times the weed inspector will have to one-on-one consultations. There's usually 30 to 70 of those a year. And they'll tell them what they have to do. Not everybody wants to take care of their property. And we have to find a weed that's on the list. So if there's no weed that's on the list, they might look ugly, but it's totally legal and there's nothing that we can do. Often in those cases, it's in hamlets. So there's a weed issue, but it's nothing on the list and it's not really affecting ag land. So we will work with the CPO on an unsightly lot then. And as you know, there's been a number of those unsightly lots taken care of that way. We don't want to see ugly properties in hamlets either. And oftentimes the Weed Control Act is not the way to do that. We have in the past when it's, you know, right against a quarter section of land or whatever. So. Does anybody have any further questions on the Weed Control Act?
Just the one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, you know, your dandelions, that's getting to be a real weed problem, you know, not just in our county, but a lot of other places too. And how did that ever got off the list that it's not a weed?
There used to be 3 different types of weeds on the Weed Control Act, and now there's 2. One of the weeds that used to be listed was a nuisance weed, and you could upgrade a nuisance weed to take control of that. Dandelion is not on any list, and unfortunately is one that we cannot force to control. A particular issue when that came off the list is for Calgary and Edmonton. They're sports fields. People don't want them spraying, and they're taken right over by dandelions. So some people accept dandelions, and some, and like myself and Morris, they're a weed, right? And it hurts agriculture production.
With that dandelions, we all know that it's one of the reasons why you got to get rid of your alfalfa again, because the dandelions take over. So we have, like in the eastern Canada, they have Roundup Ready alfalfa. In the west, we're not allowed to have that. Why would that be?
At the Ag Service Board conference a few years ago, there was a resolution that was passed. There's a whole bunch of folks that don't want Roundup Ready alfalfa in Alberta. There's a big pushback, even amongst the ag community.
I think a lot of that was the export countries didn't want it, so it was going to be more difficult to export it, if I believe, if I
That was
remember.
part of it, I believe, yeah. Yeah, I mean, clean hay is an issue, right? Especially for dandelions. It would be interesting to see the quality that comes out of Ontario. I think they have it there, right? The point of the presentation was to address that you're going to hear feedback from the community on weed notices this year. The widgets things the way are setting up on a couple properties, so be aware that it could happen and you could get pushback. And just because things seem to be silent on a property doesn't mean that we're not working with somebody to get something done.
Thank you for that, Gary. That was helpful. And that was part of your first report, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Bring up that last policy, if I can find it here. I think it's at the end. Back to soil erosion. So Agriculture Service Policy 614 and 615, one was soil erosion, the other was chargeback for blow dirt. They have a similar related content, and all the content is still valid. We just want to put it together in one policy, which will create some clarity. So these policies, one has been redone as of 2015, and then the blow dirt was back to 2016. So to properly administer the Soil Conservation Act, we have to have these policies in place. So no financial impact here. This is the same as the Weed Control Act. Somebody's land is blowing and I go give them a soil conservation notice. Then we're going to go in and do what we have to do to stop that. In an extreme case where they're not working with you. And all those charges can be charged back to the landowner if everything is done properly. So we'll get to the policy here. So Lethbridge County Agriculture Service Board recognizes that protection of soil quality integrity is vital to agricultural and environmental sustainability. The Agriculture Service Board is mandated by the Soil Conservation Act to prevent the loss or deterioration of soil from taking place. The purpose of this policy is to encourage landowners to address and prevent effects of soil erosion and ensure compliance with the Soil Conservation Act and regulations. The policy defines how Lethbridge County ASB addresses soil conservation notices within the enforcement of the Soil Conservation Act. Soil conservation notices are issued for contravention of the Act, and the guidelines will define the purpose of how landowners who have been issued a notice will be responsible for the costs incurred for any remedial work that may be necessary. So Lethbridge County shall adhere to the following guidelines when combating soil erosion that is in non-compliance. Soil conservation notices will be issued at the discretion of the Supervisor of Ag Services or as designate under the provisions as outlined under the current Provincial Soil Conservation Act and amendments to this act. Not everybody gets a soil notice whose land is blowing. It happens very rarely. This is for people that don't comply. The other day, when every land is blowing, we're contacting people, but we're not giving anybody a soil conservation notice because it's an impossible situation. The soil notices are for those that continually don't abide by the rules, and it's a one-off where their land is blowing all the time. So when notice is lacking and remedial work will be carried out by Lethbridge County or a contractor designated by the county. Remedial work may include work done in field to mitigate the erosion or cleaning of county-owned roadways or ditches that have soil deposits accumulated. So normally, where we've had to enforce these in the past, we take a grader out there and rip. So we have done that, and then the bill gets charged to the landowner. In extreme cases, you could go back and clean the ditch out with a soil conservation notice and charge the producer for that. That would be an extreme case where somebody's not playing nice. So when cleaning out the county-owned roadways and drainage ditches are involved, the landowner will be forward notification of the impending work to be undertaken along with an estimate of the cost of the project. Cost for the work will be calculated at Alberta Road Builders and Heavy Construction Association current rates as passed annually in the Lethbridge County Schedule of Fees. And when remedial work is complete, the legally titled landowner responsible will be issued an invoice. And if it's left unpaid, the amount due will be subject to all penalties and interest charges, and all outstanding invoices exceeding 120 days will be placed on the tax roll and collected as though it was taxes. Where notice issued in the judgment of the Supervisor of Ag Services, prosecution of the Court of Law appears to be the only alternative, the matter shall be reviewed by the Ag Service Board Committee before legal action is initiated. So the reason for this policy is to encourage people to do what they need to do with soil erosion, same as weeds. We're encouraging people, we have the teeth of the Weed Control Act to write a weed notice, we have the ability to write a soil conservation notice. So in the past week, I've had to remind people that if they did not take care of their soil erosion, which was out of control, that the county might have to come in and stop it for them and charge them back. It wasn't a way to get them boosted. They were going to do it anyways, but we're putting the word out that we do have teeth to this enforcement. We have put out numerous public service announcements that farmers need to check their fields. It's very discerning when I go out and on a Monday after it blows and I'm finding all these fields. It should be the farmer that's found all the soil erosion well before I get there, right? And then the phone starts ringing and it just keeps building on the week of issues out there. So we're putting out public service announcements on Facebook. We've put out PSAs through the news outlets, and I've had calls from every surrounding municipality asking us what we're doing, because there are not a lot of other municipalities that are even making phone calls on soil erosion. They just let happen. We have a history of doing this enforcement, and in my mind, it's something we need to do to protect the farmers that are doing the right thing. I've seen areas where corn crop is growing, it's blowing across the road, and it's cutting off someone's barley crop. I mean, you're getting a notice right away on that one when it starts affecting other people to that degree. And this is another one where we often don't make friends. We're just doing our job. We're not jerks. We're just We're consistent with our approach and straightforward. Some people don't like being told what to do.
Thank you, Gary. And like you said, this is just two policies, no changes being combined into one?
Yeah, that's right. And so in dealing with these policies, the recommendation has to go to county council. This deals with fund money, right? So in this case, we're moving that the Ag Service Board approves policy 614 soil erosion as amended, and that the policy revisions be forwarded to the next council meeting as well. So we want to rescind a couple policies here as well. I'm not sure why, but the public works policies, they had some that were redundant. They were pretty well exactly the same, and they put them in both, I guess, so they didn't get missed. It just made it more confusing. I've renewed policies, and then some of those old ones haven't been rescinded. So in this case, we want to rescind policy 340 and the policy 615, which is the charge for blowback.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, and that happens over and over, you know, like when you got there last Sunday, a week ago, that was a pretty severe storm that Sunday, you know, and we actually in the afternoon, our circle had 4 tractors in the field, you know, trying to stop it, but of course there was a lot of them. They probably should have been there too, but they wouldn't be because it was Sunday. However, that's what you deal with. But something like that, when it happens that Sunday, you know, that almost over half the fields are blowing, and that's some beet fields, canola fields, corn fields, and, you know, those type of fields, and it's a lot of them, you know, what are you gonna do, you know? You just gotta hope that these people take action, and I seen several of them, you know, they were taking action, including our circle, you know, we had 4 tractors going in the afternoon, and, yeah.
Yeah, dealing with these situations is very difficult.
Yeah, that would be,
So we know who takes care of their soil erosion. We've been around a long time. We've seen who goes in there and takes care of it right away. The problem we're having this year is that repeated soil erosion. That Sunday was terrible. Some people will not work the land on Sunday, that's fine. But they had the opportunity to go in there and take remedial action prior to the next time it blew. We're phoning a lot of people, you know, we know what the soil looks like. It's going to happen again, and you haven't done anything. Some guys have put incredible amount of work putting manure on land. The one time before the last here, the ground was frozen. That was a very difficult. They're putting manure on as quickly as they could, and it takes a long time to put manure on a quarter section. We had guys that had spikes on their cultivator. They were just floating on top of the frozen ground and everything was blowing. That's difficult. So in those cases, they need to phone the Ag Service Board. We'll get a grader out there and work with them on ripping it. In most cases, we can get rippers into frozen land. If we can't, well, then there's a real problem. It's just something you're going to have to accept. And the key is that we often see soil erosion yearly from the same folks. They need to leave their land in the fall in better shape, the ones that are continually having it blow into filling the ditch. So we're educating, and like I said earlier, part of this education is the new generation of farmers. They haven't had to deal with this. The people that we're calling, they appreciate the help for the most part. They just don't know what to do, and they're at wit's end. So we're happy to help, and that's why we keep putting those PSAs out.
Yeah, you're right there. Well, there's a lot of no-till going on and stuff too, of course, way more than it used to be. But even the no-till quarters were blowing this year. And that was actually amazing, because usually there's enough stubble there that it doesn't. But this year was an exceptional year. But overall, what you mostly see are the same ones whose land blow year after year. And not only this was a bad year, but even other years when it's not that bad, their land still tends to blow.
Absolutely, and those are continuing conversations we have. And we're finding that when we put out the information, sometimes the neighbors will let them know that maybe they should do something a little different next year.
Any more comments or questions? Motion at all? Lauren?
I would move that Ag Report approve policy 614 and forward it to the May 6th county council.
Thank you, Lauren. Any questions or comments? Call for the question. Those in favor? Approved? And then the rescinding of policy 340 and 615. Klaus? Thank you. And that's to rescind the policies 340 and 615, the charge back for blow dirt cleanup, and be forwarded to the May 6th county council meeting. Any more questions or comments on that one? Call for the question. Those in favor? Carried. Thank you, Gary. I guess that's everything, so
Yeah.
motion to adjourn? Everybody? Ken?
Thank you.
Call for the question, in favor?